Good morning, Rob Nankervis. Welcome to a beautiful Monday morning in Melbourne.
Good morning, Darren. Great to be with you virtually.
Mate, virtually, yes, of course, because it is stage 4 here in Melbourne. We got severe lockdown restrictions. We have a beautiful Monday morning. It's magic looking out through the window, and all we can do is really just gaze at it and think of how wonderful it would be outside.
Exactly. Well, that's why I'm in here with the office is now set up with green screens. All my work's remote. That's just the way of the world at the moment.
It is the way of the world at the moment, and I really appreciate you making time out of your busy schedule to spend it with me. And for our listeners, I just wanted to give them an overview of your career thus far, and then we can sort of launch into lots of questions we want to peel back the cover of inside your brain and understand more about. So, Rob, you spent most weeks as a youngster at the wharf, watching your father manage a team in his transport and storage company that he worked in. You then went on to decide you want to pursue a career in business, and you went into accounting of all things at Victoria University, and you landed several jobs across major organisations, big name organisations. We've got News Corporation, the Peter MacCallum Institute, and the Australian Wheat Board. And then you went on to work at Ernst & Young, where you're a Director of Performance Improvement across health, transport and defence industries. And after 30 years of working for the guy, so to speak, you decided you want to get out there on your own, and you created your boutique consultancy firm called Propelling Performance. It's fantastic to have you here. Tell me, in your career so far, you've described that you work with mid-tier organisations and mid-tier leaders. What does that mean, to give us some perspective?
Yeah, so mostly the people who come to me, Darren, is when they've got a handful of leaders on their leadership team there, and they're for some reason stuck. So they're probably a business that's got 20 to a couple of hundred staff. Their normal revenue is a few million to a couple of hundred million. And normally they're looking to double in the next 3 to 5 years, boost the performance of their business, grow the revenue, and make a more valuable business. And the interesting thing to me too has been in this, make it an easier business to manage. So many of these guys who, they're such impressive individuals who own and lead these mid-tier businesses. But a lot of the load comes on them, Darren. You know, it's a
huge responsibility.
This great idea, and they've been very good at doing the thing, and now they've got a business that does the thing, and they've got to run it.
It's a different set of skills. It's a different way of going about things. Rob, I want to focus on two perspectives in our conversation this morning. Those two perspectives are from what has Rob Nankervis seen in your own business experience through your time that you were with EY, and then going back in News Corp and the Wheat Board. And the second perspective is really how you go about coaching business leaders and how they can implement and execute. I know that you're a scaling up, you use the coaching methodology Scaling Up, written and developed by the wonderful Vern Harnish. Tell me, how do you bring all that into play to get executives focused on coming up with a goal, and then how do they implement their teams, rally their teams to execute on that?
Yeah, so the things like Scaling Up are great frameworks to get people's thinking focused. It's in a sense, I use it a bit like the intel inside my business, and obviously through my wide reading and experience and so on, I add a lot of things to that, and it depends on what clients need in particular circumstances. I mean, the interesting thing to me, Darren, is that all these people have got good businesses. So I'm not a turnaround guy. I'm not a startup guy. I work with people who've already got a great business. They're normally multi-decade old businesses, some of them multi-generation and so on. Got great products, good people working for them. So fundamentally, to the outsider, these are actually good businesses, and they are good businesses. What the owners want is for them to be great businesses. And they're often, when they come to me, it's some version of "we're stuck," right? And so, and a lot of that comes down to perhaps there's not a strategy, perhaps it's lack of accountability, impacting execution performance and things like that. There might have been some event perhaps it's a transition from one generation to another,
Yep.
or some other issue has happened in a business that sort of triggered them to come and seek
Yep.
out some sort of help.
Yep. Just want to go back and understand, is there a difference between working with a generational business, a family-owned business, and then working at an organisation which is, perhaps a public company or a well-known private entity?
Yeah, I think there is. It's look, the end goals might be the same in many cases, Darren. They want to grow, they want it to be more profitable, and those sorts of things. I've actually seen a lot more heart in the privately owned businesses. The people genuinely care about their product, about their customers, about their teams. It's not just the bottom right-hand corner on the spreadsheet that tells them how much money they made and what that'll mean for their bonus. I mean, I've talked to owners who've taken money out of their mortgages to put money into their businesses to pay their teams and to make things right in the business because that was the right thing to do.
Yes.
So there's a lot of that being personally invested in their business. But the other side of it is many of them family businesses, is that they operate a bit like a big family. And what partly happens is that the leaders can end up looking like the parents in the family, and the people who work with them become a bit like the kids. So there is some of that. There's a different dynamic in family-owned businesses to corporate. Yes. In that regard.
Yeah, no, thanks for clearing that up. I've often wondered that and wanted to just get some clarity in relation to that. So go back, we talked about two elements that they often have. They don't have a strategy and they have lack of accountability. So what happens? Does an organisation, an event happen, something triggers for them to go, wow, we need to do something about this? What's that event?
Well, sometimes it's simply that they realise they have everything it takes, all the fundamentals, and they've invested in this thing, and they say, why isn't this performing better? We think we've done everything that we need to have done. We've got the factory, we've got great products, we've got a good set of A-grade customers and so on. Almost what's next,
Yeah. How do they determine that to get to what's next? Why wouldn't they think that everything was just okay and we're going through our motions, we'll just keep going and things are going to get better?
Oh, and I suspect, Aaron, that's what most do.
Right.
But there's the handful who are humble yet hungry leaders who want something better for themselves and for their teams. And they're thinking, what else? What next? And sometimes they don't have that answer, and they seek some external support to inject some thinking, to bring some independence and objectivity to it, and so on. And that's the sort of time that they'll call people like me. Right,
understand. And so, how do they know to come to you? How do your clients find you? How do you, what triggers them to take action? Go, I'm going to call Rob.
Yeah, look, it's often by referral, but I've been doing this for many years now, and so it's clients referring people in their networks, which I'm very grateful for. It's people who've perhaps been to one of my public workshops or seen things that I've written who it resonates with them, and they decide to reach out. So all sorts of different ways that things happen. So it's which obviously doesn't tend to happen in year one, but once you get, I'm in my 7th year of doing this for myself now, so you kind of, there's time for that cycle.
Understand.
Yeah.
Understand. So when you go into an organisation, what do you do? Well, how do you start the process?
Oh, look, the first thing for me, Darren, is really trying to find out what are the owner, founder, leaders trying to achieve. What would good look like for them in, say, 3 to 5 years? What would good look like in 10 or 15 years? And where are they now?
Yep.
Against that desire, and then what we're trying to do is say, well, we're really about addressing the gap between where you are now and where you'd like this thing to be in, particularly in the medium term, that 3 to 5 year period.
Yes, and Rob, how much of that direction, call it that, how much of that direction do those clients give you, and is it often related to a financial achievement, or is there other components that are non-monetary?
Yeah, so it's a number of things. It could be, I've had a number of people in the last 3 or 4 months that are, say, $20 to $25 million businesses who've said we want to be 50 or 75. A 50 million business wants to be 100. Been helping a couple of $200 million businesses that want to be in the 4 to 500 league. So yes, so for those sorts of businesses, there's a metric they're holding up to say, this is what would represent success. And then you can ask questions like, if you're 25 mil now and you want to be 50, where's the other 25 coming from?
Yes.
And that becomes the strategy, because effectively doubling in 3 years means 25% growth year on year. So
Yep.
what strategies do you need to put in place? What execution disciplines and so on to deliver on that kind of growth trajectory? And so that fosters that sort of discussion. The other part might be, look, we'd like to exit. We'd like to list the company.
Yeah, understand.
We'd like to have a multi-state operation, or there are various ways that the ambitions get realised.
Yeah. So, do they often come with multiple ambitions?
They'd obviously. No one says, well, look, I'd like a smaller business. Often they'd like it to be bigger and more profitable.
Yeah, and something
right?
else. So
and
how do you?
sometimes bigger isn't more profitable, right? Because you've got to invest. There'll potentially be a soft patch where you've invested to make it more profitable in a couple of years' time, but you've got to wear some heat now.
Yes, understand that. So how do you? What's the process you go through to prioritise? I mean, you do want to get these ambitions, these want-tos, these desires into some level of, I've got to do this. What do I do first? What do I do second?
Yep.
How do you do that exercise?
Yeah, so I'll tend to talk to people about the front domino. You know, in a game of dominoes, you can tap all sorts of dominoes. Which is the domino that you tap that will tap the most other dominoes? And sometimes it's been about wall charting it, Darren. You know, getting sticky notes and saying, well, we're on the left-hand side of the chart today. Out on the right-hand side of the chart will be this many people, this much revenue, this kind of market coverage, if you like. You know, the sandbox where we're playing will look like this. How does that plan map out on a 3-year butcher's paper across the wall?
Yep.
Where do all those pieces need to go?
Yep.
And that's been a very visual way for some teams to actually realise, firstly, how front-loaded their thinking is, in terms of, we've got a pretty good view of the next 6 months or maybe a year, but really there's a lot of vacant space in years 2 and 3.
Yep.
It also speaks to how well they understand the interrelationship between the goals that they've got. You know, if we're going to be expanding the business, can we really expand into America and into Asia at the same time? Have we got the money and the time, the resources and so on to tackle those multiple goals? Does that make sense? Does it make sense in a risk perspective, for example, as well? So they're the sorts of things that they map out, and usually we try and get them to corral those into about 5 strategic themes. You know, what's the handful of things that are going to make the most difference?
So we basically come from what they want. You know, what is it that we want to have that we don't have currently now? Yep. And we set up the priorities to how do we actually get to identify what those items are and put them in a priority order. And you take the 5 themes that are going to make the biggest difference. Yeah. And then what happens? Is it time to then go and implement those?
Yeah, well, it is. And just on that too, by the way, one of the tests is against what the core customer expects of us. You know, what do these, in terms of the attributes, how our core customer group, not any customer who could buy from us, the ones who we rate most highly and want to work with most, what attributes do they choose by, and are our strategic choices helping us get better at delivering on those attributes?
Yes.
So this comes back to the original Porter ideas, like how do you get more unique and differentiated in what you do? so that you're a more valuable provider in your market. So it's getting people to test against those things. Do they stack up against their values and so on? So that there's this sense of clarity about where you're taking the business is the first fundamental step, really.
Yeah, understand.
And that leads then into the execution disciplines. Yeah.
So let's talk to us about the execution disciplines. I guess, they say it's nice to have a plan, but if you can't execute on it, then it's not going to get, nothing's going to be achieved. And of course, without a plan, nothing, it's just a wish. Yep. So we got ourselves a plan. What happens next?
Yeah, and to be honest, that's, I think, where most people stop, Darren. They have their annual retreat, a nice game of golf, a couple of bottles of red and a good chat. And I suspect if you ask people 3 weeks later what's going to be better or different in the business, no one will be able to tell you.
Wow.
And so the discipline that I get clients to bring in is say, well, what's the routine here through which you're going to execute against the plan you've created, and that comes down to breaking your multi-year plan into a year and saying, well, if that's where you've got to get to in 3 years, what's the 1 year version of that will show that you're on the way to your 3 year goal? What do you got to do first?
Yes.
And so
they identify, they all agree at their retreat. I'm just imagining the bottles of red and everybody's all happy and dandy and willing to put their hand up and say, yes, we agree with all this. Yeah. But they go back to the office and it's now time for them to, they need to execute on this plan, but they've still got other stuff happening in the, clients are still ringing up, deliveries have gone astray, and they need to get to the bottom of that squeaky cog that, gets the oil. How does that get balanced up, and what advice would you give to businesses from your experience of how they could make that a better process?
Yeah, so what we do is work out all the execution stuff before they even leave the strategy day. So what we're doing is cascading the year's plan out of the multi-year, and we're cascading the current quarter's plan. So I've just been finishing these with a group of clients through that kind of June, July period, doing the rest of their annual planning.
Yes.
And they cascade the annual plan into what that means for Q1. And what that Q1 plan means for Q1 by each individual who's at the meeting, personally.
Right, so they get a divvied up responsibilities. Is that what you're suggesting?
Correct.
And they take on a particular task to do within that framework of Q1 with that time scale.
Yep. And so part of the power of this is not just having the clarity of what the overall direction is for the business, but what are those individual commitments that we each have to make to get there. So it takes it pretty quickly from being an esoteric idea about wouldn't it be nice if the business did this, to what does that mean for you personally in the next 90 days that you're going to do?
Yes.
Part of what this is, it takes it away from being personal, just between me and my boss, to being cross-committed around the leadership team.
Yes.
So when you say, I'm going to do this, you're 3, 4, 12. In one case, on the last call I had, there were 23 leaders on the call who all know what their team is committed to.
Yes.
So you've got a bit of lock-in then.
Yes, you've got a bit of accountability between.
Didn't you say you were going to do this? So it's not all just
in front of their cohort. I mean, this is keeping them accountable for what they say in front of an audience.
Yep, peer accountability, right? So, and then it's not just reliant. So part of my role is helping take the weights off the boss. So if it's always the boss, it's like being a parent, right? If you have to keep reminding your kid, can you put your washing out? Can you put your, like at some point people get tired and...
That's never happened. That's never happened to my children. Mine are perfect, Rob.
It saps a lot of energy, particularly as the business gets bigger, Darren, so you want a system to do it rather than being person dependent. Okay. So I institute that where they're all cross-committing, and it's a bit like at a wedding. If anyone's got an issue with this, speak now or forever hold your peace. This is what we expect
10,
to happen.
9, 8, 7, 6, bang, the guillotine comes down, the door is locked.
This is what we expect to happen in the next 90 days, and that you will do. And we get it to be spoken in a way that you can test whether or not it got done.
How does that work? Give us
So
an
I tend to talk
example.
to them about colours. So what would a green traffic light look like on this? So for example, one of my clients was going to be recruiting a new general manager to run their factory. And so the HR director said, well, in the current quarter, I'm going to recruit a general manager. And the team said, oh, that's great. Yep, excellent. And so I said, well, hang on. So I said, does recruiting a general manager mean you've put an ad out, you've got a long list, you're interviewing a short list, you've made an offer, the person started? Which of those
Wow.
things? Because they all mean we've recruited a general manager for the factory. Because I figured around a table, there's likely to be different interpretations of what that means.
Good call.
Yep.
Very good call.
So in the end, what they agreed is that green would be where we're reviewing a long list.
Right.
Because
so they haven't hired a general manager.
Is it actually likely that that person will have started in your factory within 90 days in a senior executive search process? No. Right? So that's not. So what's the point of her setting that up as a goal? That doesn't make sense. So green, good, success is that we've got a long list. That so when we get to the iteration and say, how do we go with that goal? She can say, yeah, we've currently got 8 people we're reviewing on a long list.
Yes.
So that's a green.
Yeah, interesting. And it's interesting that you really need to, the group needs to clearly agree on what are the definitions of different things.
Yep.
Because, one guy says, yeah, we got it all under control, and you could just assume that, yes, that's sorted. But it's far from actually sorted when you dig down deep and understand where the process is at.
Yeah, and so this is where I know where I get this sort of proud coach moment is when I hear the team saying to each other, "Yeah, but Darren, how will we know you've done that?"
Wow, they're all keeping each other, they're holding each other to account.
Exactly, and so then you tend to capture that item, which either has a metric on it, or like that recruiting thing has a milestone kind of gating piece on it that you can say, did we or did we not have a long list? There's something you could show people. And it takes the mystery out of it, okay? And it's much easier to then hold people to account, saying, well, do we have a long list or don't we?
Yeah. So, Rob, just as a matter of interest, what do you define as the definition of accountability?
Yeah, so can I actually hold... So accountability, the ability to count, right? So is there some way of measuring or assessing that thing has been done? Who is accountable, being held to account, able to answer to that thing?
That thing.
That's different to responsibility. Someone can respond to it. Somebody's able to contribute to it and so on.
Sure.
But where does the buck stop, really?
So, I think the difference is that you can be responsible for things. So I'm responsible for taking my rubbish bins out, as an example. That's a task, and I'm putting up my hand and taking ownership for that. But when we're talking about accountability, you can only be accountable to people. I can't be accountable to the rubbish bins. I'm accountable to my family because we have rubbish jammed up, and I'm accountable to my neighbours because, if my bins aren't out when they should be out on Tuesday nights, and he's going to come and knock on my door and go, Darren, you forgot your rubbish bins again. So it's about understanding there's a difference between responsibility and accountability.
Yep. And so one of the things that surprised me, to be honest, was how quickly teams have embraced this idea that they are actually held to account. And part of it is I have the privilege of only working with businesses that by definition are wanting to be better and are a bit driven. They're sort of winners as it is. They want to be successful. And great people, high performers, actually want to know how well they're doing, don't they? I mean, that's part of their sense of how do we go this month, this quarter, and so on. So, and the beauty of that system too, by the way, is that it then becomes a cadence in their business that they say, well, we're going to have these reviews each quarter, and when we've done each quarter's review, we're going to set the sales for the next quarter.
Yep.
And in between times, they know that there's going to be a coaching discussion in between those quarterlies. So me with the CEO with their direct reports and so on. So that's the expected cascade of this. And what it means is that if you and I have got our own 5 things on our plan that we have to do to make a dent for the business in the coming quarter.
Yes.
It's not a mysterious annual conversation where everyone's scrambling around in those last 3 weeks before annual review.
The cram before the exam.
I mean,
Not that.
what an absurd idea that is. The bizarre part is that nobody likes it, right? The person doing the reviewing or the person being reviewed.
Everybody hates it.
Yeah. And so this system is much more real time. So it's, if I'm doing a coaching call with you, it's about, so Darren, let's, how are you going with the things on your plan, your handful of things that you've agreed with me in front of our whole team that you said you do. So the mystery is zero, right? And then we can have a one-on-one, it gets away from this idea that leaders say, oh, look, I have a coffee catch up with my team. What's that mean? Right?
Yeah, it talks about the weekend and they review what they did on Saturday.
This is a structured conversation.
Yes.
About the handful of things. What are you trying to get done? That's your list of 5 things. Where are you up to with those?
Yes.
Oh, look, I reckon I'm on track. I'm green with these. I'm a bit stuck with it. Great. Okay. What are your options for moving that forward? What are you going to do next? Much more coach-like as a leader than boss-like. Okay.
Understand.
And the beauty of it is the accountability sits with the individual. Leader, not with the boss, right?
Yep.
The system has transferred the weight to the individuals. So it's this idea of helping the leaders to be more coach-like in their leadership, or some of them get external coaches to coach particular leaders. Doesn't really matter. The point is that they have that type of conversation.
So, Rob, do you, for those people that don't achieve and find out they've missed their numbers, they missed their goal, if they didn't get a green light, they are on a red light or an amber light.
Yep.
What's your thought in relation to consequences, or hate the word, but penalties? I mean, what happens? Tell me, how do you see the world for that?
Yeah, so I'm a pretty tough marker on these things. So basically green is completely done. Orange is almost done. So if we get to the end of the quarter and you were supposed to have got a report done, you say, look, we've got the report done. It's supposed to have been signed off. We've got the meeting to sign it off in 10 days. Yeah, okay, that's an orange. Everything else is red, right? Because you can actually do a lot more when you have an honest conversation about where are things really up to.
Yep.
And my aspiration is that normally they'll get about 75, 80% greens, which is what most of the teams achieve. And there's still that 20% oranges and reds, which I'm actually okay with because it's a bit of a balance between sandbagging everything so they're all soft, easy putts that we are always going to get, versus tough goals and you never get, it's a sea of red, which isn't very motivating. So it's a bit of a balance there. And frankly, teams get better at judging how far they're going to get through something. Their ability to predict and so on and balance their work gets
I'm guessing the longer they're in the system of utilising the colour scheme, the more they will grasp the concept, but also be really tough on their colleagues if they're not at the level they should be, or the colleagues trying to put a different colour on it to the way it appears.
Correct. So the conversations get better. And in terms of the punishment thing, I think for most people who are professionals, they probably punish themselves more than anyone else will punish them, their own disappointment at not getting things done. So then there comes a question with the reds. Are these things that are now no longer relevant? Was it the wrong thing to have picked altogether?
Sure.
Was it something beyond our control?
Yep.
So for example, often reds come up like a merger or something like that, an acquisition. Well, The other side didn't come, the delays and all that sort of stuff. Well, we did what we could do. The thing's still red. It's not progressed. The case is though that if people keep coming up with reds, that's a more significant conversation with if they're a senior executive with the CEO, if they continue to not be able to deliver on the things that they need to get done. So some of those sorts of people over time have exited.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Understand, but
as the business scales, the expectations get set. And bear in mind, these sort of systems are new to many people. Like it puts them under more pressure, albeit properly goal directed for the benefit of the business pressure, it puts
Yep.
more structure and pressure than a lot of people are used to.
Well, I mean, I think the whole topic of accountability has become more in today's acceptably used in today's society. I mean, we hear it every day on the news in relation to economic accountability and political accountability for the leaders that are leading countries in times of hardship, like we are with COVID at the moment.
Yep.
Accountability has just become more acceptable. Yet a lot of people don't really know what it means. And in terms of red, amber, and green, it's clearly understood by the entire organisation of what's acceptable and what isn't. It's truly wonderful. Rob, talk to me about celebrating.
Yes, look, what we try and do is get them to set up and say, look, when we've achieved what we want to do for the year, the quarter, how are we going to celebrate that? Because one of the things that entrepreneurs have told me, and their teams have told me they're terrible at, is celebrating, because it's almost in their quest for being better, there's a risk that they're never satisfied. You know, we were at 2 and now we're at 6. Yeah, but we're not at 10.
But you're correct. It could always be better on the other side of the river.
Exactly. And so, and so some of the entrepreneurs, they've told me that themselves. They said, look, this is a gap for us. And so what I like to do is set up, you know, is there some way we could celebrate when we get these goals? In fact, there was a group a couple of weeks ago, and they've got a goal to win. They need 4 more big accounts. And so they want 4 of these, an additional 4 $500,000 key accounts in the coming year. So they said, well, these are some big fish. We need some more to get some more big fish in our business. And so we agreed we'd have at the end of the quarter, if we've got a couple of these big fish on the line, we're just going to have like the managers are going to bring a fish and chip. We're going to have a fish and chip lunch.
Yeah.
So what I said to them, it's more about the spirit of celebrating and doing things rather than saying, oh, we've won a big account, we're going to give everyone $5,000 or something like that. It's about, we did this as a team. Let's have a bit of a party together. Let's make it a bit twee by having fish and chips to celebrate landing the big fish or something like that. Right?
Yeah. Having a
so
theme.
in a sense, it gamifies it, Darren. It's making work a bit more fun. And you know, they're much more likely to talk about and remember the fact that they had this huge feed of fish and chips on a Friday lunchtime, turned all the factory off for a couple of hours and had some fun together, you know.
I mean, Rob, I asked you the question specifically because it's what I've noticed when dealing with my own private clients is that the celebration component is just not achieved. Most people, as you said, get themselves from a 2 to a 4 and, you know, are really happy there's a 100% increase. But hang on a sec. Yeah, we're not at 10 yet, or we're not an 8 yet. When is enough? And I think it's about getting in the perspective, celebrating that victory and coming together as one, and then moving for the next step forward to go to the next place that you're all headed.
Yeah. Well, because what happens is over time, I say to the leaders, look, you're actually not managing a business, you're managing energy. And if you don't top up the tank with some of this positive emotion, the celebration and so on, you're actually leaking or burning energy out of the system without replacing it. And so one of the things that I always do when we do these annual and quarterly reviews, the first thing we talk about, well, what's happened? What have been some of the highlights? And even in some of this period we're in now with COVID and so on, I've got like stacks of highlights from clients of things they've done, and they've actually sat around their table and said, wow, we'd actually forgotten that we'd done some of those things in the mess of everything else. And of course, one of the reminders that I give them is who else needs to know about these things?
Yes.
And it's to go around and thank the other team and put them in newsletters or do a little WhatsApp video, which is a couple of the clients have taken on doing and so on, to share some of those great stories in the business and sort of top up the tank. So celebration is sometimes a very physical, like one event-based thing, and sometimes it's actually just more part of the conversation in the business about sharing some of the highlights and wins.
Oh, Rob, look, mate, this is absolute gold, and I appreciate the time that you've given me today and to share this with all of our viewers. In closing, I wonder if you remember that wonderful email you sent me about the 6 C's.
Yep.
You remember it?
Yeah,
Do you
yeah,
want to
sure.
just share that with us and explain those 6 C's? I think it's a wonderful way to round up our whole conversation that we've had this morning.
Yeah, sure.
Let
So,
us have it.
so in terms of some tips for helping drive accountability through the business, the first thing is clarity. Get really clear about the direction of the business. It's effectively the strategic point. What needs to be done? Then against that, the second C is about commitment. What is the commitment to the priorities that are going to deliver on those strategies, and getting that commitment down to an individual level. The third one is colours. What would green look like on doing these? What's done? And then in terms of checking in on the dones, what's the cadence, that regular meeting rhythm that you're going to institute in the business? And we go from kind of annual 2-day planning right down to 12-minute daily huddles for everybody in a business. And so they all know that's a cadence. And what about coaching then, so that the individual, as well as that team cross commitment, what's the individual coaching follow-up, either peer coaching between individuals in a business, or boss and direct report accountability to help keep them on track with that handful of things they've committed to for the month and the quarter. And then what's the celebration? On a couple of levels, how are people measuring things so that they can tell themselves that they've had a good month, week, quarter? And also, is there something bigger for the business or for that division? They've just implemented the new accounting system. They've won the 4 new accounts. They've got all the trees planted for the coming horticultural season. What way are you going to celebrate this before you start that circuit again?
Yeah, Rob, that's fantastic, mate. You've summed up the 30 or so minutes we've just been talking about in 6 C's, and I think that's absolutely fantastic. Rob, you're committed to working with senior executives who are looking to drive sustainable growth to their business and increase product profitability. Mate, you've done a fantastic job this morning in sharing your recipes with us, and I really appreciate your time. Thanks a lot, Rob.
Great to be with you, Darren.
Thank you, mate.